Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hello, everyone, and we're glad you can attend Attitude's weekly ADHD Experts webinar. We hope that everyone is staying safe and staying well. Just some housekeeping before we get started. If you've listened to one of our webinars before, you know we offer attendees a certificate of attendance. When the webinar ends, a post-event survey will pop up. It will list 3 questions about the quality of the webinar, followed by 3 questions titled Required for Certificate. If you would like a certificate of attendance emailed to you, you should answer those 3 questions. If you don't want a certificate, well then don't bother. Also, one other thing, just to let you know, we've had a couple of challenges with our sound in the last couple of webinars, but we will be recording this so that the replay will be just fine. We'll manage to capture everything. So today's webinar addresses how to create and implement structure back into our lives now that the COVID crisis has turned everyone's routines in life upside down. We are all experiencing a wide array of strong emotions, feeling very anxious as we socially isolate and listen to the ever-changing news about the virus. Our parenting skills have been tested to the max as we spend 24/7 with our families. We all know that structure is good for the ADHD brain in order to be productive, but our old routines that we work so hard to create have been tossed out the window. Now we have to face the challenge of creating new routines based on our new lifestyles. Thankfully, we have Sharon Saline here to help us with these challenges. She is a licensed clinical psychologist with more than 30 years' experience. She is a top expert on ADHD, anxiety, learning differences, and mental health challenges, and their impact on school and family dynamics. Dr. Saline is author of an award-winning book, What Your ADHD Child Wishes You Knew, Working Together to Empower Kids for Success in School and Life. You can reach Sharon at drsharonsaline.com, as well as on Facebook and Twitter. You can ask questions of Dr. Saline during this presentation, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can after she finishes. If you want to download the slides of the webinar, click the drop-down menu labeled Event Resources on the bottom left of your screen. If you do not see the Event Resources tab, you need to refresh the page. Now, with all that being said, let's finally get to the webinar. Thanks for being here today, Sharon. We're all anxious about your thoughts on this.
Thank you so much, Wayne, for having me, and thank you for Attitude for all of the amazing work you do and the resources you provide to the community. So it's been rough lately, and the new normal is anything but normal. There have been huge adjustments for all of us with numerous disruptions in our lives, in all areas of our lives. And kids are home for reasons they may or may not understand. They've lost what's familiar to them. Daily routines, seeing friends, playing sports, participating in music, drama, or art activities. So today I'm going to offer you some practical tools and tips for living with more cooperation and less arguing during this period of confinement, and how to set up some and readjust some of your morning routines and other routines in your day that will reestablish some kind of stability and calm in your family. We're going to rely on a foundation of strength-based thinking and attentive awareness. And strength-based thinking is when we lean into our child's interests, into some of their talents, into what they love to do, and they show some, and they're good at. Right? And attentive awareness is observing, listening, seeing what our children are showing us, not just with their words, but with their behaviors. All right, so I'm going to try to advance the slide. There we go. Big changes, big feelings. So this is a particular time where there's a wide range of emotions that we're all experiencing right now. And things go from sadness and disappointment to anger, maybe relief that there isn't school and I don't have to engage with people, but also worry. When are things going to go back to the way I like them to be? The news doesn't help us in a lot of ways. We'll hear something that's distressing and we adults will talk about it. Our kids will listen and hear that. It's difficult for kids with ADHD typically to manage big feelings because the ADHD brain, as we know, matures more slowly than the neurotypical brain, with the executive functioning skills coalescing around the age of 28, about a 3-year delay. And so what that means is that there is a fundamental lag in the ability to manage emotions effectively that we see normally before this pandemic. And so now with all of these uncertainties, our weakest executive functioning skills are hit hardest and first. And so we may see what we call regression in emotional management and in behaviors that kids had finally moved beyond. Some of these kids are living in traumatic situations. There's been family losses, deaths. There might be a lot of parental stress. There could be abuse in the home, domestic violence, and they're struggling to get by the very best they can. They also may be experiencing the absence of friends as a traumatic experience. We have to fight the failure mentality that kids with ADHD naturally possess. And here's why they possess that negative mentality. And it's because they're used to hearing comments about how they could do things differently, i.e. better. And they start to believe that, and they have an internal conversation about what they're doing wrong. They're worried about the next time when they're going to mess up when they didn't know they were doing something they shouldn't be doing, or they realize they shouldn't have done it after they've done it. Their working memory and their emotions are deeply tied together, and they're not coalescing to help them make decisions that we want to see them make in the course of every day. Kids ADHD will lack confidence about their abilities, and naturally it's hard for many of them to shift from one thing to another and to make changes. And this situation requires a lot of flexibility. What happens that I'm seeing in a lot of families are punishments. And punishments really don't help kids with ADHD because they don't teach skills. And these kids need to learn skills, executive functioning skills. We have to boost and build those skills. And particularly at a time when we're stressed and we're tired, our weakest executive functioning skills are hit first and hardest. So what we want to do instead of focus on punishment is we want to think about logical consequences and incentives. Option A, you do the plan, you earn the incentive. Option B, you're unable to complete the plan, then you're unable to earn the privilege, and instead there's an alternative. And you want to plan for these moments of lack of cooperation. I know that's probably not the best English, but moments when kids aren't cooperating, rather than to be surprised by them and disappointed when they occur. If we can expect that there will be these difficult moments, then we can create a plan for success together with our kids. Because here is a fundamental nugget that I want to share. Your kids dislike arguing with you and dislike the conflict as much as you do. Of course, it's natural for kids to push against parents because that's part of the separation process. But nobody wants to live in an arena of conflict. So we want to think about creating consequences in terms of this idea of earning or not earning privileges, but also in terms of paying back time, making amends, apologies of action. So my perspective is an integrative, collaborative approach to living and parenting kids with ADHD. And if you've come to some of my seminars before, you know I'm going to talk about my 5 C's of ADHD parenting. And this is this foundation of strength-based thinking and incentives and routines. Instead of leaning into authoritarian parenting, punishment, and the because I said so, my way or the highway parenting that certainly I received as a child. Our goal is to teach lifelong skills while being more efficient and effective in the tasks of daily living, because this fosters independence. And that's something that we want to share with our kids. We want you to be independent. We want you to have autonomy, and we need to work on developing those skills together. So these 5 C's, I'm going to run through them super quickly. Self-control. You adults, you manage yourself first so you can act effectively and teach your child with ADHD to do the same. It's kind of like the oxygen mask on a plane. You put your mask on first and then on your child. Compassion. You're going to meet your kids where they are, not where you expect them to be. Understanding that it's natural to have some regression, to have big feelings they can't manage. And this lies at the heart of a positive parent-child alliance and helpful attunement. We're going to accept the brain that they have and try to think about what it's like to walk a day in their shoes. And we're going to be compassionate with ourselves as parents and adults. This is a really tough time. So we want to be able to cut ourselves some slack and cut our kids some slack. Collaboration. We're going to work together with your child or teen and other important adults in their life, as in teachers or educators, to find some solutions and strategize options to deal with daily challenges, particularly around school. We're going to use consistency. Now, consistency isn't perfection. Consistency is steadiness. I don't expect you to do what you say you're going to do, and be perfect. But what kids do expect is that you are going to follow through on what you say more times than not. Not all the time, and there are exceptions, and you can explain those exceptions afterwards. But when you say you're not going to do something and then you do it, or you say you're going to do something and you don't follow through, this is very confusing for these concrete thinkers. So we want to nurture their efforts to do their best. And when we focus on the process of them trying things, we're focusing on their efforting. We're not going to try to hold up a standard of only focusing on accomplishments, because that's defeating for them. They're making efforts towards a goal that we're asking about. Then we want to notice that. So predictability and routines are part of consistency, and these are very comforting for kids with ADHD, and they're especially comforting right now for all kids, whether your kids have ADHD or not. And that has to do with the anxiety that's interrupting our lives every day. And the 5th C is celebration. This isn't baking a cake because your child clears the plate. You're noticing and acknowledging what's working by continuously offering words and actions of encouragement, specific praise, and validation. This is going to counteract that negativity bias I was talking about earlier, that conversation that they have in their brain, that they're not okay, they're not good enough, they can't do things. Remember that Dr. Barbara Fredrickson wrote that the positivity ratio should be 3 positives for every negative. I'd like you to just think about what's happening in your house right now. Most parents I talk to think the ratio is anywhere from 1 positive to 10, 20, and sometimes 25 negatives a day. This isn't going to help your child be motivated to participate in things, particularly that have to do with you or that you've asked for. So we want to try to shift the focus to things they are doing, and they're doing pretty well, rather than things they're not. Now, how can we make this very difficult, challenging situation work for your family? So we're going to start with the 5 C's. And before you start any kind of plan or routine, think about what you want for each day and what would help you as a parent stay as calm as possible. Because if you're dysregulated, your kids will be too. Collaboration is more important now than ever. And we want to create interventions that include kids in the process, because without their buy-in, they won't participate as much and there's less success. We want to start with compassion. Your kids don't wake up in the morning thinking, how am I going to mess up mom or dad's day? Let me see. What can I do that's going to make it hard for them? No, they're acting out because they're bored, they're angry, they're frustrated, they're confused, and they're anxious. Expect this. Empathize with their loss and stress the ways in which they're adjusting and the importance of us working together as a team. They're experiencing things that they don't understand. We're experiencing things that we don't understand. We could be each other's allies in this way. Reflect on your goals. what actually needs to get done for school and chores every day? What assists your kids in working on those tasks? How many breaks do they need? What are they going to do during those breaks? Pick specific times for waking up, getting started on studying, and going to bed. You have to have some normalcy that you are recreating in a time that is very abnormal, because these routines are grounding for all of us. You know, I'm sure as an adult, you wake up in the morning and you think, ugh, I don't really want to get out of bed. What's the point? Or you think, oh my God, I have to get out of bed. I have to get to work. I have to get my kids ready for school. I have so much I want to do. But underlying, really, you'd like to go to the beach and just wish that this was all gone. Your kids aren't that different, right? So we want to try to help them create some kind of familiarity to each day by having a routine. And this is very important. And you're going to tie the have-tos, the things that are part of the routine that they need to get done, to the want-tos. And that usually right now is about screens or fun time. And we'll talk about that in a minute. You need to decide how much fun screen time your child can have each day on top of what they need to do for school. So if you think in your family it's okay when school's done that your kid can be on the computer or on social media or on their phones for 4 hours, okay, that's great. That's your decision. But don't give them the 4 hours automatically, and don't take the 4 hours away because they yelled at you. What you want to do is give them an hour automatically every day. I call this easy on, easy off. They get an hour every day no matter what, unless they're going to inappropriate sites, they're engaging in inappropriate behavior online, and that would include bullying or sexting. The other 3 hours, or they have to earn, and they have to earn by doing those have-tos. You create, you connect something they have to do for school to an hour of their bonus screen time. And kids want this bonus screen time, and that's some of the leverage that you have. It's reasonable right now to allow your kids a little more time than usual on screens. It's not going to damage them for life, but especially if they can interact with their friends online, or you can get some of your tasks done. Write your goals down. When you can sit down and talk with your kids about creating a routine, you have your goals, and then you can ask them questions and refer back to some of your goals so you don't get lost or triggered by things your child is saying. Remember that kids with ADHD do well with visual cues. Put that map of that routine, that list, up in the kitchen, up in their bedroom. They need to have several places where they can see what it is they have to do. So I talked a little bit about this. So I jumped the gun a little bit about the easy on, easy off method. My personal belief is that screen time is a privilege. It's not an entitlement. So we want to work with our kids on creating a collaborative plan about when, where, and how to use screen time. And what I mean by this is, if you think in your head, okay, I'm going to allow my son 4 hours maximum, what you want to do when you sit down for the negotiation is say, well, I think 3 hours is about the right amount of free screen time. And they'll have a meltdown. And then they'll say, no, I need 5 hours. And you say, no, not 5 hours. Okay, we could do 3.5. And they'll say, no, I really need, how about 4.5 hours? And you say, all right, I'll meet you at 4. You want them to have a sense that you're giving them something that they want, and you're in a dialogue and a negotiation. This is very important because it helps kids see that you're working with them for something that matters to them, which means that they want to participate. Okay. All right. So I had some of you sent in a number of questions that Wayne and the team shared with me, and I want to address some of these questions. So let's talk first about sleep disruption and trouble going to sleep and waking up. So often kids with ADHD struggle with this naturally, and that has to do with the norepinephrine or dopamine dysregulation in the brain, mostly norepinephrine, which has to do with sleep and alertness. So your goal here is less conflict, and that's their goal. So it's important to share with them the significance of having regular routines for health and safety. And that's still your job as a parent, monitoring their health and safety. And to be factual and honest about that. Medication on school days is a have to. It's not a want to. And your kids will say, well, I don't need to take my medication because I'm not really going to school. But the fact is they have school responsibilities. And again, that's part of the incentive plan you're going to create. You take your pill, you do some homework, you get that extra hour of bonus time that you want. We have to have screen sunsets. One of the reasons kids have trouble falling asleep is because they've been much, much more inactive than they typically are. And so when you're on screens for a long time, it affects our brains in ways I don't exactly fully understand, but it does, it does have to do with, our release of melatonin and our ability, our fatigue, our eye fatigue, eye strain, and just the stimulation in the brain. So we want to have a balance where actually screens go off at night. And that may mean that screens have to live in your room in a locked box. And I know that doesn't sound super appealing, but right now there are kids who sneak into their parents' room at night to get their phone, to get their computer, because they can't sleep and they want something to do. One family I know who was having this problem got an Alexa. And so, because their child said, I need my phone because I like to listen to reading a book that I'm reading on tape, or I want to listen to music. And so they got an Alexa so that the Alexa was in the child's room, but the phone was in the parents' room. And so that helped them know that there was some limit on what was happening with the visual screen time. It's difficult for kids right now to wind down because they're activated with visual stimulation all day long. And there's a way in which that visual stimulation also makes us lethargic. It's kind of deflating. And so it's this strange kind of activation. And so we really want to help kids have a period of time before they go to sleep where their mind slows down. It's hard to disengage from these visual activities, whether it's gaming, social media, watching movies or TV online, because your mind keeps going. Your mind keeps going and it's used to having pretty much constant stimulation. So we want to slow that down. When are your kids really tired? You may have had bedtimes and wake up times before this pandemic that don't actually fit with what's happening in life right now because your kids are less active. So consider extending the wake up time maybe by a half hour and the going to sleep time by a half hour. Talk about this with your kids. Rather than impose what you want and coming from an authoritarian place, it's not really going to work right now with these kids. Instead, engage them in problem solving. And we can talk later with some suggestions of language that you could use for that. Expect that you're going to be present and participating both at wake up and at some time going to bed. You don't need to stay up till 2 a.m. because your teen wants to stay up until 2 a.m, which of course I don't advise in any case. But what we want to do is that your child very well may need you to keep them company, to keep them on track, which is a slightly regressed behavior, but that's what's happening right now. You might want to post a list of bedtime activities, including grooming, stories, room pickup. Try to gamify some things. See, for younger kids, can you race them? Can you time them and see if they can beat their time each day? Make a list of what that time is. Can you play a game? Who can pick up the most things from the floor in 20 seconds? I mean, we want to try to have some fun with this. It's harder in the morning to get up, and it's harder, of course, to go to bed when there's nothing really compelling to do. And this is a real issue for kids with ADHD because they lack dopamine, that neurotransmitter that runs along those pathways of interest and reward. It's more difficult when there's no excitement in a day. Every day kind of seems the same. And of course, we can all understand that. So we have to cut them some slack and remember, using compassion, that they're struggling to just participate at times. Keep your routine super simple. The more complicated the routine, the harder it's going to be for a kid. And when children are refusing to do the plan, refusing to do your routine, refer to the plan you made and the agreements that you have. And I strongly urge you not to allow electronics in the bedroom. Kids can use an alarm clock. If you don't have one, I'm sure you can order one, or when you go out for your groceries, pick one up at Walmart or something. But alarm clocks are really helpful, particularly if they're across the room and there's more than one of them. Having a phone in a room right now is just a dangerous temptation. Use the time before going to bed as some quiet connection time, even if your child wants nothing to do with you. Sit down put your head in, just tell them you love them, ask if there's anything that, they want to talk about from their day, maybe tell a funny story. If you watch a TV show together at night, which I really encourage families of teens to do, to kind of have some bonding time with their teens, maybe make a comment about the show or what you liked. Tell them you love them. I know I just said that, but it's important. You could play a quiet game to wind down, maybe read a story together, listen to some quiet music, do some stretching. Some families I know are meditating before bed. Brainstorm about that with your kid. They may choose nothing, or they may say, look, nothing is not an option here. You need to pick one thing. So how are we going to motivate kids with ADHD? A lot of you are struggling with motivating your kids. And what we want to do is we want to remember that interest stimulates motivation. And there are two types of motivation: extrinsic motivation, that's outside of us. It refers to an outside request or reward, and it depends on achieving that goal. In the past, you turn in your permission form for your field trip on Friday so you can go on Monday. And there's intrinsic motivation, which means striving towards a personal goal for satisfaction. You decide you want to hit your next level in your computer game, or you aim to run 3 miles instead of 2. And when a task is fundamentally unrewarding or uninteresting, like homework or doing the dishes, there's less excitement, there's less dopamine, and it takes kids longer to get moving, and they may not be able to get moving at all. When there's no clear immediate satisfaction or benefit, there's a struggle to do the task. And so we have to use external incentives and rewards to encourage kids with ADHD until the internal satisfaction of doing these activities kicks in. And I have to tell you that it doesn't really kick in until their late teens, early 20s. In neurotypical brains. And so we're going to add a couple of years. And of course, development isn't linear, so you may see some steps forward in one area and some steps backward or in place in others. So let's talk about reducing homeschool learning hassles. So the first thing we want to do is to work with your kids. Listen to what they're saying or showing you. So for example, I have a client whose son prefers to wake up very early in the morning, take his pill, do his homework before school, go to online school, and then have nothing to do in the afternoon because he's tired, he doesn't want to, he's done. And then they repeat that every day. It was unusual. It was hard for my clients' parents to adapt to, but I urge them to listen to try it. So we're going to try to think a little bit outside the box with our kids and do things that they may suggest that are a little wonky or weird, but we don't lose anything necessarily by trying. You're going to approach problems from a we perspective instead of a you attitude. You're going to create a routine that it basically includes where, when, and how. Those specifics are very important for kids with ADHD. You're going to help kids determine the ideal level of doing the ideal order of doing their work and the length of time they can actually focus before they need a break. This requires a conversation. How do you like to work? Do you want to do the easy stuff and then the hard stuff? Do you want to get the hard stuff out of the way and then the easy stuff? Which subjects include hard, easy, medium? Let's ask them that. What do you observe about how long your child can focus before they need a break? What do they observe about themselves? And what are their teachers telling you that they observe at school? This is all part of the plan that you have to create. And honestly, I really want to encourage you to talk about the flow of how they like to work. Some kids, older kids in particular, really like to get into hyperfocus and stay there. Some kids like to switch between subjects when they're bored. How does your child like to work? Rather than just assuming they're going to sit down and do work, let's do a little digging to figure that out. You're going to use incentives and you're going to decide in advance what you're going to do during the break time. So if your child can work for 15 minutes and then needs a 5-minute break, and can work for another 15 minutes and needs a 5-minute break, and then maybe needs a snack, a little bit longer of a break, so it's not 5 minutes, sorry, and then can go back to do a little more work and is then done for an hour or two, okay, great, work with that. Okay. So basically you want to have sometimes small, you want to have incentives or plans for these breaks. What are some activities during breaks that are okay to do? And then what are activities for those longer breaks? And those would be the incentives that we've talked about earlier. And that might be going on YouTube, doing social media, texting, going for a run if you're lucky as a parent, your child will do that. 5-minute breaks would be shorter. Movement, bathroom, snack, petting the dog, some jumping jacks, going outside to sit in the sun for a few minutes. So you want, when your kids stop working, you want to help them to come back to their work by essentially having notes, Post-its that are cues. This is what I was doing when I stopped. This is where I want to go back to. And you want to do something that I call family work time. And this is really helpful for kids with ADHD. Everybody works together at a certain period of time in one place or two places. And when I say two places, that would mean that there's more than one adult in the family who's home or working at home. It's hard when you have 3 kids and they're all on virtual school in 3 different locations. But when it's time to do follow-up work or homework, come together at the table. You bring your computer. I'm sure there's stuff you have to do, and your kids can be there too. Then you can answer questions. For kids who have ADHD and a coexisting learning disability, it's helpful that you might be there to read an instruction, to answer a question. So that's really important. And finally, adjust your expectations. We're not expecting perfection or the level of academic achievement that you may have seen before this pandemic. This is a very challenging situation for kids with ADHD because the structure of school, being in a classroom with peers who are engaging and learning and model for our kids with ADHD what that's like, and they can gauge their behavior accordingly. When you're at home, you cannot do that. So it's important not to cut them slack and let them not work at all, but to adjust expectations in conversations with them. Now, I know in my school district here in Western Massachusetts, all the grades are now pass-fail. And that does change motivation for some kids. In fact, it lowers motivation. And it's important that you as a parent know how your child's doing. And that's a fine line between monitoring what they're doing and being a helicopter hovering parent. I talked to a mom yesterday who said to me that she noticed that her child wasn't doing homework. I said, well, how did you notice that? And she said, well, I got a call from the school that she was failing all her classes. And I said, oh, and the mom kind of laughed. The mom is an educator and the dad is an educator. And she said, I guess we have to make sure she takes her medication and be a little more engaged in her learning. And I think that's very true. So we can talk with you if you have a question about what's the line, of appropriate levels of engagement. And finally, I just want you to remember to acknowledge the efforting that your child is exerting when they are doing any work at all. And, have something fun planned for when they complete a project. Make ice cream sundaes, order pizza, Let them pick the movie. Inject something that lets them know that you notice that they're really working. So I wrote this because I didn't want to say celebration. You might have taken that the wrong way. I'm talking about focusing on the positive, and I've mentioned this several times today, and I think it's really important. We've got to try to lighten up what's happening in our families. And so we're going to make a little lemonade. Exercise or do the dishes to your kids' music, with the clean lyrics, of course, and learn a couple of the words and sing along to the tune. They'll be like, "Oh my God, you're so embarrassing." And you'll be like, "Yeah, man, that's my job," right? You want to try to have a little fun. We want to gamify a bit. Positive experiences, laughter, these nourish our inner strengths. And for positive feedback to outnumber the negativity bias in our brains and the things that kids with ADHD tell themselves, these positive things have to be held in our working memory long enough for it to be picked up and transferred down the memory line. And kids with ADHD often struggle with working memory impairments. Their brains can't often hold on to information. But because of these working memory impairments, it means they also can't look back into the past experiences and lessons they've learned and apply them to the present. And so they may have some amnesia about things they've done in the past to overcome current obstacles. We have to help them with that. And while a previous experience may not look like the experience that they're having now, the form may be different. The content is different. The process is still the same. How are we going to help our kids build resilience? And building resilience means tolerating the discomfort of not knowing and being disappointed, believing that you can bounce back from things. And resilience is the antidote for shame, anxiety, and low self-esteem. And kids, we want to foster a growth mindset for our kids with ADHD because they lean toward fixed mindsets, believing that their intelligence and their skills can't change. In a growth mindset, kids understand that they can get smarter through hard work and learn how to do things that they previously didn't know. Okay. And they need their parents to stay with them in this process. Ellis, age 17, told me, "My parents are as patient as they can be. It definitely gets hard. And I'm sure my parents are mad at me a lot for doing things I didn't intentionally mean to do. But it's always like, okay, here's what you did. Let's improve it. That way I don't get too mad at myself either." So let's review our guidelines for solutions that are going to work. You're going to avoid lecturing or solving problems for your child or taking things personally. You're going to manage yourself first so you can be available to them. You're going to use a skill deficit model, not a conception of what they're doing as a failure of will or judgments with words like laziness and selfishness. You're going to take a long view, remembering that executive functioning skills develop in neurotypical brains until age 25 and with a 3-year delay in ADHD brains. And so that you may have to keep supports in place longer than you've anticipated. And particularly, you may have to bring back some supports that you had moved on from right now during this stressful time. Build in breaks, variety, and choices when doing tasks or helping kids organize the tasks they have to do. Create simple routines, use lists, and follow them. Plan for success by expecting pushback and having alternatives in place for those stressful moments, and give specific praise. So I'd like to open this up to your questions. We have a lot of time for questions, and I think that right now that can be so very helpful to all of you who are out there living in these challenging times.
Well, that was excellent, Sharon. Lots of great questions, actually. One is morning routines. People want strategies specifically for the morning chaos. Mm-hmm. Is there anything you can add beyond the presentation you gave to address that particular problem?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. I want you to, what is important that you do is you have a clear wake up time. So most of the families that I work with and the families who come to some of my workshops struggle with getting their kids out of bed. And so what that means is that you have to plan for like a wake up, then a fall back to sleep, then a wake up, and then this is it, you have to get out of bed. Okay. And this is it, you have to get out of bed is this whole sequence of getting up in the morning is something that you have to negotiate with your child. Like, okay, how many fall back asleeps do you think you're going to need? Because I think only one is really what's working. Because when it's more than one, we're not getting things done in the day and you're not able to show up on your computer screen on time. Be clear about what the morning routine requires. So if kids are having trouble getting dressed in the morning, consider having them go to bed in their clothes for the next day. Many kids are just wearing the same clothes day after day. I would suggest that your kids put on a clean underwear. It helps you feel like you're showing up for something. This idea of showing up is important. Breakfast, it needs to be at a generally regular time with, if your child is on medication, that's when they need to take their medication. And I would encourage you not to have if you live in a 2-story house, not to send your child back upstairs for anything. Once your child comes downstairs, it's downstairs for quite a while. So if they need to have a toothbrush downstairs, bring that. I'm not sure if that's specific enough, but I think that can be helpful. Sometimes kids right now, I'm noticing, need to get dressed with their parents present. So you could both be getting dressed together, if that's an issue.
Oh, those were some good specifics. Several people have asked you to talk about giving directions with the rule of 3. I believe it was one of the slides in your presentation. And they can't seem to wrap their minds totally around the rule of 3. So could you explain that a little more?
Yes. So I apologize. I was speaking about other things, so I'm happy to explain it. So the rule of 3 is how to give directions that your child actually receives. So a lot of times in families, we will do things like, hey, it's dinner, let's go. And, it just goes right over their heads, right? So what we have to do is not yell between rooms or even yell within a room. You need to go over to your child. And I know you're thinking, oh my God, I can't believe how much time this is going to take, but it's what's needed. You go over to your child, you put your hand on their shoulder, and you make eye contact with them. You say, your eyes on my eyes. And if your child doesn't like to be touched, then that's okay. But somehow your hand on your shoulder and the comment, your eyes on my eyes, it grounds them and it tunes them to you. Then you speak the direction. I want you to come to the table for dinner now. And you ask them to repeat that direction twice. What did I ask you to do? Dinner? No, I asked you to come to the table now. What am I asking you to do? Come to the table now. One more time. Come to the table now. Thanks. Let's go. So you are asking them to repeat what they hear from you, not once, but twice, to encode it in their memory. Now, teenagers will roll their eyes at you and tell you, shut up, I'm not doing that. And here's what you're going to say. Listen, I'm tired of yelling. You're tired of yelling and it's not working. So we're going to try this rule of 3 thing where I'm going to have you look at me. I'm going to say the direction. You're going to repeat the direction twice, and then we'll see if that reduces the yelling. And your teen will say, I'm not repeating it twice, because this is what teens do, right? They argue with you. I'll do it once. And you say, you know what? We're going to do it twice for 3 days. If twice for 3 days seems to be not too much, we'll cut down to once. We'll make a deal. Baseball is always the rule of 3. So is our rule of 3 in terms of giving directions. And for younger kids, explain, I'm tired of the yelling. We're going to just do something differently right now. We're going to do this giving directions, the rule of 3. And I've seen this work in many, many, many families, particularly for kids, who are angry at their parents yelling at them across the room, and who then, because they're angry that their parents yell at them across the room, and then their parents get mad at them because they don't hear them yelling across the room. It takes this whole area of conflict and it just really cuts it out of the system.
Mm-hmm. Very good. One parent has brought up, you mentioned parent having adjusting the parental expectations for academic achievement during this time. One parent is saying, my son's teachers have not adjusted theirs, and they're still looking for superior performance in this very, very tough time. Do you have any strategy or suggestions for how a parent should maybe talk about this with the teacher?
I absolutely think it's important for parents of kids with ADHD to confer with the teachers and say, look, this is not ideal learning for kids with ADHD at all. And so my child is doing the best work that they can given this situation, and the superior work or the kind of work they were able to turn in before is just not possible right now. And so we need to negotiate as adults here. And I would include the child in that conversation in some way. What are you capable of doing? What are you going to agree to? Because many teachers are struggling to translate their curriculum to an online version of their curriculum. And so they are loading kids up with tons and tons of what I would say is busy work or self-learning. And self-instruction is not really a strength for kids with ADHD. And so that has to be called into question. And if you feel like your teacher is not really amenable to understanding the challenges for kids with ADHD, then I suggest that you talk to the guidance counselor or who's ever in charge of 504s and IEPs at your school.
Mm-hmm. Another mom is talking about medication and her daughter. My daughter doesn't like to take her medicine, so I stopped making her take it now that she has more flexibility at home. Is that acceptable?
I think that's a personal decision. If she's able to not take her medication and do her have-tos, okay, why not? But if she can't do her have-tos without the medication, then that isn't really a good solution. So you've got to figure out for yourself, is she able to do what she needs to do? And are we managing, relatively well without the medication? But if we're not, then we have to reevaluate. And maybe you could come to some agreement, like during the week, you take it, but on the weekends you don't have to, or whatever. You can negotiate that. But the issue is she able to do what she is responsible for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good gauge. One parent says, many of us are used to punishment techniques because that's what we experienced as kids. How can we start to change that behavior?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So our minds, because many of us were raised this way, go to, I'm just going to take this away from you. And as soon as you start thinking about what you're going to take away, I would encourage you to flip that on its head and say, okay, if I want to take it away, then it needs to be an earned privilege. Period. Mm-hmm. So, because if taking it away only teaches kids what not to do out of fear. It doesn't teach kids how to set up a life where they get the goodies after they do the stuff they may not necessarily like. If you think about yourself as an adult, probably you do the dishes before you watch your show on TV, so you don't have to do the dishes when you're tired. Right? Mm-hmm. Or we want to wake up in the morning to a sink full of dirty dishes and breakfast, and it'll take so much longer. You understand that you've set up that arrangement for yourself because you have learned how to do that kind of motivation. That's what we have to do with kids. So yes, there are ways in which you can have, logical consequences and natural consequences. Natural consequences are, it's cold out, you don't wear a coat, you're cold, right? A logical consequence is your sister, you bit your sister, and so you actually are not going to earn the extra. You bit your sister, and so you're not going to earn that extra computer game, that the points towards that extra computer game that you want. Or you bit your sister, and you're going to have to make an apology of action, make amends, which means you're going to now have to do something nice for your sister. So I'm going to separate you. We're going to take a time apart to cool down. but we're going to come back together, and then you've got to make amends. This is more, it's just a change of perspective, because yelling and punishing, and I'm going to tell you, I'm not perfect. I definitely have yelled at my kids over the years. There were ways in which my son tortured his younger sister, my daughter. But punishing him didn't teach him how to be nicer to her. And so what we did instead was really said, okay, well, we're going to take a break till things cool down. But tonight you're reading, you need to make amends. And here's the list of options for doing something nice for your sister. Which are you going to pick? And he said, well, I'll read her a story. And she loved it. And I think it just shifts the dynamic a little bit. So take some time to think about what are some ways that you could, what are things that should be earned privileges that you could stop giving them but have them earn, number one. Are there points that they could earn towards something that they desire, a thing, and that if they don't do something, they don't get those points. And if they hurt someone or do something that's inappropriate, how are they going to make up for that? Sometimes, kids can yell at you and be really nasty. And you could say, you know what? We're not going to watch, we're not going to do this together, but instead you're going to help me fold the laundry. We were going to play a game of cards, but I don't think that's what we're going to do. Instead, we're going to fold the laundry. So you're together, but you're not necessarily doing the activity, the pleasured activity of choice.
Mm-hmm. That's good advice. This question is about, is it too late to start a routine? This family, they were so overwhelmed in the beginning. They've been sheltering in place for 2 months, and they were happy to just have everyone get along. So they let the kids do whatever they wanted. Now they're saying, is it too late to try to put a routine in place?
Absolutely not. It is never too late. It will take some adjustment. You can expect some pushback, but it's never too late. I would start small. So don't try to, don't make the routines too complicated and too big. Just start on a few things that you're going to routinize in the beginning, and then you can move forward and add some things in later on. But it's never too late to start with routines, and the routines help really reduce procrastination. I think the one thing that you want to think about is how big the tasks are that you're asking your kids to do. For kids with ADHD, if a task seems too big, they can't get started. So you want to make it smaller, right? So maybe instead of, folding all the laundry, they could fold the shirts and you do the socks. You break things down into doable chunks. Maybe instead of doing all of your English homework, you could do this part of it and then take a break and do this other part.
Mm-hmm. Are there any specific strategies you recommend for parents of preschool age children?
Oh, this is really complicated. I work with one family, and this poor little boy, he's so confused. He misses his friends. He wants to see them, but then there's like music hour every day from preschool, and he doesn't really participate. They don't really understand what's going on. And so I think the best thing that you can do for little ones is try to create some semblance of a day with maybe a new activity that you find online, that each day there could be maybe a special project in the kitchen or a craft, and going outside. And I'm playing, of course, I would imagine doing this every day, going outside and doing something outside, the two of you, playing games like red light, green light, or tag, introducing some of those old-fashioned things to your child, those memory block games. If you don't have memories, you could use cards. It can be helpful. Kids, this is a very difficult time for young children. It's a very long day for parents of young children. If there are two parents at home, I'd suggest some tag teaming so you can each have a break. And maybe a project, building a fort if you have a yard. Maybe if you have a living room and you don't have a yard, building a fort anyway. Trying to just create a special activity each day that there's something that they can look forward to sort of ground themselves. If they're in preschool and their school is meeting, maybe they'll participate, maybe they won't. But I know that there are online activities. I'm sure there's music for preschoolers or something that they could watch. And use the screens to give yourselves a break. It's hard with young children. You're on all the time. And so if you need a little rest, that's when you want to give them their screen time.
Mm-hmm.
Or you have work to do, of course.
Right. Several parents have just brought up that their teen sons and daughters refuse to do school online. One son apparently is in danger of failing 3 subjects. All he wants to do is play video games with his friends. That sounds familiar. So
yeah.
I don't know what kind of advice you could be giving. That's a tough question.
It's a really tough question, and it's a really critical question. So kids have a job, and their job is going to school. And for kids with ADHD, it's hard enough doing that job when school was in session. And now that school's not in session, it just seems like a big waste of time. And so it's difficult to try to convince kids that it's not a waste of time. And yet that's our job. That's what we have to do. And I think that it might be useful to have a conversation about what does it mean if you fail these subjects? Like right now, you may not want to do this, but let's just project a little bit into the future, or let's have a conversation with your counselor. What does it mean if you fail these subjects? And is that something that's an eventuality that you're interested in having? It also might mean that kids are a little overwhelmed by the online school situation. A lot of kids struggle. They struggle to have, 20 of their friends on the screen at the same time. And, they're having a hard time modulating themselves. They themselves get distracted. And this is just really a very challenging time for kids with ADHD, and particularly teens, to learn. So they're just going to say, no, I'm not doing it. So I guess my question is, how do you want to arrange for their access to online activities? Because in most families, you can control turning the I want to say the box. You can see I'm super technologically advanced here. You can turn off the modem or the cable box. Or you can contact your provider, and so that you have some control over what they're doing. I mean, I really think that refusing to go to school because they hate it, I get it. I really get it. I don't learn that. I would have trouble learning that way as well. And so I think what they're not able to see are what the longer term consequences are of failing. And I would guess that they don't want to fail. But what I see with kids who are not doing well in school right now is avoidance motivation. Not, I want to fail. I don't care. That's what they're telling you. But inside what they feel is they're just overwhelmed by the amount of work. They can't figure out how to break it down. There's no structure that's familiar. They certainly can't create that structure for themselves. And what's helped kids the most who are struggling, who have ADHD, is being able to talk to a teacher, and in particular a support teacher, and meet with them once a day. So I think if you can have contact with your support teacher and do some work with that person daily, it makes a difference. And I've seen this with a couple of my clients now who were doing very poorly, and now they have they have a half hour or 45-minute phone call work period with someone who is a learning support person at the school to help them get a handle and catch up. Because once you've fallen behind, what happens is we're now dealing with, a very deep and persistent failure mentality, which is, why bother trying if I'm going to fail anyway? I don't see a way out of this tunnel. So we've got to help them step back and break things down into really small, doable pieces so they can start to feel like they're actually making some progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that strategy of talking with a support teacher, if it can be arranged. I've heard several parents have commented that that's worked for their kids at Attitude.
It really makes a difference. And if your kids go to a public school, they're mandated to do that. Most kids with ADHD have a 504 or an IEP, so they are mandated to receive services. And if your kids go to an independent school, there's a learning support person who's there to do this. That's their job, and they will.
One quick last question before the hour is up. I bring it up only because several parents have brought it up. A 17-year-old and other ages has insisted on locking her door all day and working, doing her schoolwork behind a locked door. Several people have commented that teens are doing homework in their bedroom behind a locked door. One parent said, "What should I do? Take the door off the hinge?" So
not sure I would agree to that. My question is, why are they locking the door? So if they're locking the door because they want to have privacy, what kind of privacy is that lock giving them? You know, what happens a lot with teens, and the reason they lock their door is because they don't want their parents to come in unannounced, and also because teens are feeling like they have no place of their own. They have no space. And for a teenager, that's like suffocation, right? They want to have some space between me and my parents. That's what being a teen is all about. So the question is, what is the purpose of the locking of the door? And is that locking being abused? If the child is in their room with the door locked and doing work and their grades are sustained, then they're actually doing what they say they're doing, and that lock is symbolic. If they're in that room with the door locked and they're not doing their work, or their work isn't getting done, and they're not going to sleep at regular hours, then they're showing you that they're not ready for the privilege of locking a door. And I'd be really clear about it, that locking your door is a privilege. And we have to put some restrictions on it for safety. Like and for me to be able to check in. Because honestly, Wayne, and I don't want to scare you or scare your viewers, but teenagers are really vulnerable right now. And there is a higher risk of suicide or self-harming behavior because they're unhappy. And so when we're talking about safety and health, parents have to be able to have some access to their kids. And maybe what's better, instead of just knocking on the door when you want to talk to them, is to text them and say, "Hey, we haven't been in contact for 3 hours. I'm just checking in. How you doing?" And that the agreement is that your child responds to that text. And that there's, set times where your child comes out of the room, like to eat lunch and stay downstairs for a half hour or something like that. One mother told me that she texted her son, "Are you alive?" And he wrote back, "Yes, leave me alone."
It's funny. I think I've heard that one before. Yes.
Oh, I'm sure.
I do like the texting idea. That was excellent. And I think the hour is up. It is up indeed. And really, I'm so glad you could be here to help us with all this stuff. I found it very enlightening personally. So
thank you so much for having me, Wayne. It's always a pleasure to be here. And I love the questions that everybody submitted. They were so interesting and on point. And if you have questions and you want to contact me directly, please feel free to email me via my website, www.drsharonsaline.com.
So thanks again for being here, and thanks for all the attendees for listening in. Please join us next Tuesday, April 28th, when Marianne Ritchie will talk about game-changing strategies for raising teen boys with ADHD. Should be a good one.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yep. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.